Let me tell you a story. The bell above the door chimed softly as Evelyn stepped into the antique shop, shaking the autumn chill from her coat. The place smelled like thrifted things. You know, old paper, polished wood, and time itself. She hadn't meant to come inside. In fact, she wasn't even sure what had drawn her in. She was walking home, lost in thought, and the shop's dimly lit windows simply caught her eye. Now inside, she scanned the cluttered but inviting wares. Nestled between a stack of yellowed books and a tarnished silver clock, something specific beckoned her. An old rotary phone, the kind she remembered from the summer days she spent with her grandparents. Deep black with a worn brass dial, the handset resting just slightly askew. It looked out of place among the other antiques, as if it had simply been forgotten. But it called to her. She stepped forward, tracing her fingers over the smooth, cool surface. A tag tied around the cord was handwritten in a delicate script. For things left unsaid. How curious, she thought. A slow shiver traced up her spine. Evelyn turned toward the counter, ready to ask the shopkeeper about it, but for the first time, she noticed she was alone. No one stood at the register. No footsteps echoed in the quiet. Then, a soft click sounded behind her. She turned back to the phone. Slowly, with expectant anxiety, she reached for the receiver and pressed it against her ear. The line crackled softly, like the sound of static between radio stations. Evelyn's pulse drummed in her ears as she gripped the receiver tighter now, her fingers curling around the worn edges of the handle. Then, through the static, as if there all along, Evie? Her breath caught in her throat. She hadn't heard that voice in decades. No, that wasn't right. She had never really heard it at all. Not like this. A voice from old home videos, a voice in the stories her mother told her, a voice that had existed in fragments, pieced together from memories that were never truly hers. But this was real. This was him. Dad? She whispered, the word barely making it past her lips. A soft chuckle came from the other end of the line. Yeah, Evie, it's me. Evelyn squeezed her eyes shut, pressing the phone to her ear as if she could somehow close the long distance of this impossible call. How is this happening? She asked, her voice uneven. A pause. Then his voice came again, warm, steady, familiar in a way it never should have been. I don't know, sweetheart. It seems impossible. Her throat tightened. You weren't there. Not accusing, not angry, just a quiet truth that had lived in the spaces of her life for as long as she could remember. A soft sigh from him. I know. Evelyn stared at the counter in front of her in an attempt to make some sense of what was happening. She swallowed hard, trying to find her voice again. There were so many things she could say, so many things she could ask, but none of them seemed big enough or small enough for this moment. 1,000 thoughts tried to leave her mouth at once as she heard herself say, I have a... Clara, he finished her sentence. Every other thought vanished. From the other end of the call came a sigh that carried years of unspoken words. Evie, she's just like you. Her fingers curled tighter around the receiver now. Her chest ached. He knew. She let out a shaky breath, barely able to form the words. Yeah, I guess she is. That soft chuckle again came through the line, warm. What a beautiful life you have, Evie. She felt her heart break and heal at the exact same time. For her entire life, Evelyn had carried this ache, a special place that had never been filled. a presence she had never truly known but had always longed for. Evelyn cupped both ends of the receiver as if she could keep him there a little bit longer. "How is this happening?" she asked, her voice quiet. "How are you here?" A soft exhale came through the line. I don't know, sweetheart." He paused, as if choosing his next words carefully. "But I don't think we have much longer." Her stomach clenched as a tear trailed from her eye. No. She hadn't realized how much she needed this moment until it was already slipping away. "It's all right, Evie," he said gently. "Dad, please don't go." "I love you." His voice was steady, like a hand on her shoulder. "And Evie, I'm so proud of you." Evelyn let out a trembling breath. "I wish we had more time." The line crackled and the static returned. She gripped the phone with everything in her. "Dad. Dad." Silence. She wasn't sure how long she stood there, listening to the nothingness where his voice had been, holding on to the warmth of his final words. The gentle chime of the shop's bell stirred her. Evelyn blinked, the weight of the moment settling in as she looked down at the phone in her hand. Carefully, she placed the receiver back into its cradle, her fingers lingering for just a moment. For things left unsaid. The words on the tag stared back at her, but she no longer felt the ache of unfinished conversations, not in the same way. Pulling her coat tighter around her, she turned toward the door. As she stepped into the night, the crisp autumn air filled her lungs. The world outside was just as it had been, a quiet street, the glow of the streetlights, but something in her had shifted. For the first time in a long time, Evelyn didn't feel like she was walking alone. And as she made her way home, the warmth of her father's voice stayed with her, not as a distant echo, not as a borrowed moment from someone else, but as something truly hers, an impossible call, and a memory finally lived.
Sweet dreams, my friend.